الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمد عبده ورسوله صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد، أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لن ينال الله لحومها ولا دماؤها ولكن يناله التقوى منكم. صدق الله العظيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Respected brothers, sisters and friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we are amongst those days wherein worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most beloved, and we draw close to the season of sacrifice of Qurbani, Udhiyah, which is the slaughtering of an animal, goat, sheep, ram, or 1/7 of a large animal like a cow, buffalo, ox, or a camel. So this is based upon the sacrifice of Ibrahim alayhi salam, who was the pioneer, whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested immensely. One of the greatest tests was the sacrifice. What type of sacrifice was this that Allah Azza wa Jal commanded Ibrahim alayhi salam? It was the sacrifice of his own son. We are commanded by Allah Azza wa Jal to sacrifice an animal. Ibrahim alayhi salam, according to his rank in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being a Nabi, was commanded to sacrifice his son. And this is the spirit of sacrifice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see from us, i.e. a replication of the spirit of sacrifice of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam did not question, did not turn to logical reasonings. He simply undertook the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He simply carried the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out. This, through and through in the life of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took immense sacrifices from him. The athar, the effects of which and the barakat of which we see today. Were it not for the sacrifices of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, we would have no haram, no hajj. Were it not for his sacrifice, there would be no Qurbani, no Udhiyah. Similarly, Allah Azza wa Jal wants to see the same zeal and spirit of sacrifice from us. There are people from amongst the Ummah amongst the Muslim community who question the sacrifice. And ayadu billah, this is a hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how can we question the command of our Creator? How can we question something that is obligatory upon us? This is poisonous to the faith. This is detrimental for our iman. Questioning the reasoning and logic behind the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and complaining that this is against the welfare of the environment or the animal economy. Why not give charity instead? Why not give sadaqat in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and give money instead of sacrificing an animal? It would be more beneficial for the needy and the poor. The answer to which is that Allah Azza wa Jal is not in need of your logic. He is not in need of our intellect, because Allah Azza wa Jal is the creator of the intellect and logic. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who commands, whether we understand that command or not, whether it on the surface it defies logic, whether it is in accordance to our logic or otherwise. That does not matter. Allah Azza wa Jal wants to see the willingness, the spirit, the zeal to submit ourselves to His command. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see from us. This is what everyone is capable of doing, what everyone is bound to do and is obliged to do by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not every individual has the capacity, nor is every individual obliged to find out and research the reasoning and logic behind each and every command. This is impossible. Yes, we have the likes of Shah Waliullah Muhaddith Dehelvi rahimahullah, who was a master of this field of verifying the logic and reasoning behind the ahkam of Sharia. But this is not the game of each and every human being. This is not the field of everyone. There are exceptional scholars, exceptional men of Allah who understood the logic and reasoning behind the ahkam of Sharia. What is more important, what is more virtuous in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the zeal to sacrifice everything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if that's what it takes. And Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam showed that spirit and presented that zeal in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Logically, what can justify the slaughtering of one's own son? Whoever takes a life, as mentioned in the Quran, is as if he has taken the life of mankind. And one who is guilty of murder will reside in Jahannam for a very long time, as is mentioned in the light of the Quran. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, however, sees a vision from the maker of the law, the creator of mankind, Allah Azza wa Jal, that he is slaughtering his son. And Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam questions the same zeal from his son Ismail والسلام, who also became a Nabi. He also became a prophet. And what was the response of Ismail alayhi salam? Ya abati fa'al ma tu'mar. O my father, my dear father, do as you have been commanded. Satajiduni insha'Allah min as-sabirin. You will find me, God willing, of the patient. The same zeal and spirit of sacrificing his own very life was displayed by Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam. And Ibrahim alayhi salam carries out the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, placing the knife upon the back of the neck of Ismail alayhi salam, facing him, placing him face down, so that upon glancing at the face of Ismail alayhi salam, paternal love does not get in the way. So he faces him downwards, places him face down, and even this manner is praised in the Qur'ani Kareem by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَا وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ. When they both submitted, or it can also be translated as when they both embraced Islam, when they both embraced the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَا وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ. And he placed him, Ismail alayhi salam, face down. وَنَادَيْنَاهُ أَنْ يَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا. And when Ibrahim alayhi salam, closing his eyes, carried out the slaughter successfully, and opens his eyes, he finds Ismail alayhi salam sitting smiling at his side, and finds a slaughtered ram in front of him. So he passed the test. He passed the test that was presented to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَنَادَيْنَاهُ أَنْ يَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ. And we called to him, O Ibrahim, قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا. You have made that dream, made the dream come true. So my dear friends, this sacrifice, this zeal of submitting oneself before Allah's desires, commands and wishes is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see from us. It is not the matter of the Qurbani. Qurbani is just an amal. It is when it is performed on the days of sacrifice, the 10th, 11th and 12th, when it matters. It is a zeal of sacrifice, the spirit of sacrifice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see on these days specifically. It's the command and the wish of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from us on the 10th, 11th and the 12th that is important, and the spirit and zeal to sacrifice in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when the command comes, when the occasion and season comes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see from us. Sacrificing one's beloved things, sacrificing in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the zeal and willingness to submit before each and every command of Allah, whether we understand it or otherwise, is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see from us, is the most important thing. وَرِضْوَانٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. The pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest thing. it goes far beyond logic. Anything that we understand and comprehend which is within the bounds of our logic and reasoning is extremely limited. When man's logic, intellect finishes, this is when the Sharia commences and starts. Going back to what I said last week, that if the deen of Islam was based upon logic and intellect, then there would be no need for the revelation of books, and then there would be no need for sending messengers, for the sending Anbiya and Rasul, because logic would have been enough. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent revelation, His ahkam, His injunctions. He sent prophets, messengers to guide us towards the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards maintaining and building a strong bond with our Master and Creator Allah Azza wa Jal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants us to become close to Him. He wants us to draw near to Him. And sacrifice in the name of Allah is what draws one near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Qurbani comes from the word Qurban, to sacrifice, which in turn comes from the word Qurb, to attain nearness. Why? Because Qurbani is something, when somebody sacrifices, the fruits of that sacrifice is that one attains closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands something with relevance to the topic on the 10th, 11th and 12th, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands that we sacrifice an animal or a seventh of a large animal in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah commands to do so in that particular time, then it is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with relation to that time that becomes more important in fact than anything else, and more virtuous than anything else in that particular moment in time. As mentioned in the light of the hadith, and the meaning of the hadith, the most beloved act on these days, the 10th, 11th and the 12th, is the Qurbani, the slaughtering of animals, ihraq ad-dam. This is the most important thing on these days. This is the most important deed, which is time sensitive and is peculiar to these days. Now, it is not the blood and flesh of the Qurbani that Allah Azza wa Jal wants from us. It is the sincerity, the taqwa, the zeal to attain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala via the sacrifice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes to take from us. So we should, if one is capable, he or she should sacrifice as much as possible. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam sacrificed over 60 animals at one time in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on these blessed days, on the days of Udhiyah, in the days of Qurbani. And how kind is our dear Allah when He takes the sacrifice from us, when we facilitate the slaughtering of an animal, a sacrifice, a Qurbani. We are left to our own devices in terms of how to dispose of, how to utilize the flesh of the Qurbani. We can consume the whole, or all of the meat of the Qurbani within our own household, although it is mustahab and desirable that we split 1/3 of it, give 1/3 of it to the poor, and 1/3 of it we distribute to our family and friends, and then 1/3 we keep within our own household for our own use. Otherwise, how kind is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, as they say in the English saying, it is the thought that counts. And this is very true with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it is as if we sacrificed in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We submitted to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and our own animals that we sacrificed, Allah Azza wa Jal has given them back to us, and we are free to consume them and spend them in the way we wish and like. In the previous in the previous nations, when they were commanded to sacrifice, they were not permitted to consume and take anything of that sacrifice. A fire would come from the sky, and if it burnt the sacrificed animal, then that was a sign of acceptance. However, due to Allah Azza wa Jal's grace and kindness upon us, what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favor us with? Allah Azza wa Jal, to Him is the thought that counts, that we fulfilled the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and submitted ourselves before Allah's wishes, carrying out the command of udhiyah, of sacrifice, of the Qurbani. And that it is as if Mawlana Ashraf Ali Tanwi rahimahullah rahmatun wasi'ah, he mentioned that the kings of the past, they would, when they would be presented with a gift, they would place their hand on that gift, which was a sign of acceptance of that gift. Although sometimes they would not even take of that gift, or they would take something and give something much more valuable in return, like the story that Allama Rumi rahimahullah relates of a villager who thought to himself that the king of Baghdad would not enjoy the sweet water that we enjoy in the village and the countryside, or in the village. So why should I not take some water with me in a pitcher to present as a gift to the king? So he took that gift of the pitcher of water. Obviously it was a long journey, and during the course of that journey the water became stale, and not realizing this, he presented the gift to the king. Opening the pitcher, and realizing that the water became stale due to the long journey, due to it remaining in the pitcher for so long, he became ashamed. But the king accepted, placing his hands on it, and emptied the pitcher of water, and placed the pitcher with gold coins. And similarly, Allama Rumi rahimahullah mentions, similarly is our deeds, similar are our deeds in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which are worthless in front of Allah Azza wa Jalla, meaning that in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala we cannot fulfill His right based upon our own deeds. It is the sheer mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He rewards us, His kindness, that He rewards us with so much more in return for our sacrifices, for our deeds. So this is a manifestation of that king who places his hand upon the gift as a token of acceptance and gives far more in return. بِكُلِّ شَعْرَةٍ حَسَنَةٍ. For every hair there is a good deed gifted to the believer who carries out the command of sacrifice. And much more and beyond that and greater than that is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we present our zeal, our sincerity, and our willingness to submit before the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The greatest thing is achieving the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we fulfill His wishes and desires. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see from us. Subhanallah, Tanwi rahimahullah, he mentions that the same, it is as if Allah Azza wa Jalla has placed His hand on the sacrifice and gave it back to us in return. You're free to utilize it as you wish. And this is exactly what Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us in the Qurbani Kareem. لن ينال الله لحومها ولا دماؤها ولكن يناله التقوى منكم. It is not the blood nor the flesh of the Qurbani that reaches Allah, rather it is the taqwa and the sincerity, piety from your hearts that reaches Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we defy logic, when we fulfill the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and submit before Him, whether it seems logical, rational to us or not. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really wants to see from us. When we begin to question the logic and rationality behind each and everything, then this opens the doors to the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And rather than being a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it leads one to become a slave of his own desires. And one begins to question, what is in it for me? Whereas the question should be, what is in it? What is in this for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What does Allah desire from me? And what is the most pleasing thing in to sacrifice? What is the most pleasing thing at this moment in time and place that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala demands from me? What is the thing that is most pleasing to Him? This is the question that we must be asking ourselves in every moment in time. At this moment in time, how can I conduct myself in a manner that is most beloved and pleasing to Allah, that brings me close to Him, that makes me His beloved? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us a portion of that zeal of sacrifice, that willing to submit before the wishes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that our beloved forefather Ibrahim alayhi salam rendered, and the Messenger of Allah Habibullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam possessed. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولكافة المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.